Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody online as well to this. Welcome to the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee meeting on this day, 7th of September. We're running a hybrid meeting again today due to COVID, and for those members who are joining us online, please use the chat function or speak in question, or just raise your hands and we'll see you and answer your questions. And when we're moving resolutions, silence for people on screen online will be taken as agreement. I've been advised that there's a quorum today, and I'm pleased to declare the meeting open. I'd like to invite Councillor Pauling to open the meeting with a Mihi Whakamutunga, and then that'll be followed by Councillor Clearwater with a Karakia. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Grant. Nei te mihi ki a koe, mō tō mahi kaihotu o tātou nei waka I tēnei rā, tēnā koe. Ki a koutou katoa nā kaikaunihera nā kaimahi. Ai, tēnā koutou mō koutou mahi I tēnei komiti. Ka huri au takapakaro ki nā tini aitua, ku wehe atu ki te pō, ai nā mati, o ia marae, o ia takiwā, o ia motu, haere, hari atura. Rātou ki a rātou, tātou ki a tātou te honga ora, tēnā koutou. Ai, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai rā ki tēnei komiti, I roto I I raro I te tūnui o tēnei whari, I roto I te rohi o nai tua huriri. Ai, tēnā koutou, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai. Ai, hoa atu te rākau, ki a Councillor Clearwater mō te Karakia. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora. Whakataka te hau. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia makina kina ki uta. Kia mataratara ki tai. Ki ake ana te atakura. Hei tio, hei huka. Hei ho hu, ti hei maurora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. Just apologies today. We have an apology from Chair Jenny Huey and from Timatanga Yang Cramwell. Any other apologies? No other apologies. And online we have Timatanga Yvette Couch-Lewis and Councillor Apanui. Any conflict of interests from anyone? Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just flagging I will be out of the room in the meeting from 3 till 3:30, but I'll not.
Okay, thank you. No conflicts of interest, and there's no public forum, deputations or petitions today, and I'm not aware of any extraordinary and urgent business. We do have a notice of motion today. A notice of motion on page 9 and 10 of our agenda, and I'd like to I'll put the notice of motion on the screen, and that's the notice of motion there. If everybody is in agreement with this motion going forward, then I'd like to ask for a seconder. It's been promoted by Councillor Vicky Southworth. Councillor Mackenzie is seconding the motion, so we'll proceed with that. And I want to, Councillor Southworth, if you could speak to the motion. Thank you.
Certainly. So, yeah, thank you for letting me bring this to the council today. I have asked in the past about if we could reduce the $10 top-up down to $5, because our data has suggested that we collect from our public transport users survey each year that there is a group who cannot afford the top-ups, find it difficult to afford the top-ups, and that the proportion of that group who are in our cash users has been increasing over recent years. Previously, the advice has been that it's difficult to go to a $5 because it wasn't enough to make a return journey at $5. It wasn't sufficient going on the card for a return journey in all our zones. But with the half price fares, and then we're rolling into a $2, $1 system, then that doesn't stand anymore. So $5 is sufficient for a return. I think the $10 top up is an off-put for people who are maybe looking to just trial using the Metro, using our Metro card system. So for a family of 4, to top up by your $5 card and also put on the $10 top up, that's $60 up front. And at the present time, in a Zone 1 journey at the half price, it would cost you $8.20 to make that return journey. So you have to have a fair bit of faith in the bus system in order to put your $60 down to do that trial. So I think for that reason as well, there's a potential advantage and we might get more passengers. Of those who can't afford the top-up, it can have some really significant impacts. So just from our annual plan submissions, I'll just read from one of the comments that we got. Said, we're a low-income single-parent family. I work in town and both myself and my children need to catch buses every day. Paying to top up bus cards every week for 3 people can get expensive. There have been days where we have had to miss work or school because we don't have the $10 minimum top-up amount and the cash fare is too expensive. So that, to me, whilst that might be a very small minority of people in our bus system, that's a really, really substantial, significant impact on them. And so I'd really like to ask councillors, I've had advice from staff that this is doable within our current staffing and budgetary setup. And it fits in neatly at the moment with some work that's going on towards our flat fare and the community service card changes that are happening next year, and hence the February 23 date. And so, I'd hope that there's no really good reason not to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Councillor Mackenzie, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would like to speak in support of this motion. Making the Metro card cheaper and more accessible also has another benefit in that it reduces the barrier to domestic tourists and visitors and out-of-region Cantabrians. So to me, this is beneficial in terms of getting people, when they're visiting here, using the public transport. And I would like to see a survey of the wider Canterbury region to see how we can enable people who are visiting Christchurch from outside Canterbury, not just with a lower price, say, Metro card that they can use when they're here, but also around, expiry dates on these sorts of things, so that everyone in Canterbury can actually take advantage of this. But I think this is actually also good for visitors to Christchurch. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, I've got 3 questions to ask. I'll ask with the first one that's just been addressed by Councillor Mackenzie around tourists. I understood we had a day pass, which was quite reasonably priced. Can somebody just confirm that for me, please?
We have Sonia Pollard online. Sonia, are you able to answer questions that might come up?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Did you
Sorry,
hear that
through you, the chair. Yes, we do have a day pass available at the moment for tourists to use. Well, essentially for anybody to use. Yeah.
Yep, I understand that's very reasonably priced. My sister-in-law was down just recently with her friend, and she found it a great way to get around Christchurch and go and visit Littleton and the gondola and everywhere that she wanted to get. So just saying there. 2 questions really around this, and I support moving away from cash users. I definitely support that. I guess my concerns is if that top up is occurring as the people are getting on a bus, if it's having implications on other bus customers. And just if you're going to put smaller amounts on, then I guess that the frequency of that imposition on fellow customers might be higher. And then the other question relates to, I understand there is usually a banking cost or a digital cost for credit transactions as well? And does that actually apply? And if it does, is it the ratio I imagine would be significantly higher on smaller credits being put on? So somebody might, I'm not sure whether you can answer that, Vicky, or somebody else.
I can have a go on. Certainly the first question I can sort of answer in terms of my own experience of using the bus over the last 10 years, which is that my observation is, and I think it's because there's been more and more people linking their card up to the online top-up system, that I don't see that many people actually putting cash top-ups on their cards. When I've seen it at the bus exchange, it's not uncommon for people to actually put more than the minimum on because it's just more convenient. You put on what you need for the week. If you're someone who actually can't put that much on, but you still have to use the bus, you're still handing across cash. So there is still that cash exchange. And so those smaller amounts for those who need it, and I think another group would be, for example, the gold card holders, if they do need the occasional trip before 9 o'clock, that's when you have the time, when there's a real benefit for those particular people, but it's not frequent. I don't think this is the majority of people, even those who are topping up with cash on the bus would necessarily go to the minimum. I think it's really meeting a need for those who do actually need that. The second one, I don't know.
You finished, Councillor Mackay? Oh, Councillor Farm, you have a question? Or are you wanting? Oh, okay. Sonia, if you could just reply to that question, that would be great.
Yep, so through you, the Chair. As with any new initiative, there are pros and cons to any new activity that we may look at. So there is the potential that boarding times may increase if we have more cash top-ups online on the bus. But there are customer benefits which supports, for example, the new fare structure, and this potentially removes or reduces a potential barrier to use. So it is kind of weighing up the pros and cons. In terms of do we get charged a transaction fee? Yes, we do. So that's roughly around 4,000 a month. That is capped. So if we do have more transactions that start occurring due to this, then yes, we will find that there's a small transaction fee that comes as part of that. But again, those are things that we could actually look at as part of our contractual agreements. And in terms of the amount, you're looking at roughly about 50% of top-ups are all done online now. So that's actually quite a large percentage of our customers using the online facility.
Great. Thanks very much, Sonia. Are there any other, Councillor Farm?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I just had a question of clarification about, because is it simply about the top-up fee rather than the MetroCard fee itself? Because later, I mean, in the paragraphs it says people can't afford the MetroCard or the top-up, but this is just talking about the top-up, right? And is the MetroCard still $10 or is it $5? It is $5 then. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? No. Councillor Clearwater? Sorry.
Clearly, just the information that Councillor Southworth has given us and the staff have confirmed that in fact there's a significant number of people haven't been able to get the MetroCard because of affordability. The barriers to travelling on PT have been referred to really clearly, but that in fact too though, the numbers where there's been a barrier has actually increased. So I think there's very good reason to support this altogether around making our transport affordable as well as accessible for everybody.
Great, thank you. I'll just read the motion again. That the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee 1 requests staff to implement a minimum MetroCard top-up fee of $5 as soon as practicable, but no later than February 2023. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No one against. Carried. Thank you. Item 7.1, the unconfirmed minutes from our meeting on the 27th of July. Are there any comments related to that? Thanks, Councillor Scott. Seconder for that? Do we have a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Pauling, thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Item 8.1, the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee Resolution, the status report for September. The recommendations there are that notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the status of Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee Resolutions report. Are there any issues related to the report that people want to talk about? No. Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, in relation to 8.2 of this on page 18, I just wanted to check around the involvement of the co-chairs with the development of the terms of reference for the PT stakeholders reference group. So I just wanted to ask what steps perhaps been taken already to ensure that involvement happens. I'm asking that because it's been given a yes, but I'm just wondering where that is at.
Can a staff member just confirm where we're at with that process? Sonia, could you please address
Through
that?
you, Chair. As per the action from the previous meeting, a draft terms of reference for the Public Transport Stakeholder Reference Group will be shared with the co-chairs of the Urban Development and Transport Committee for review within the next week. This draft has been run through with the initial members of this new group, and the team have recently met with a residents association interested in membership. This request will be raised with members at the next meeting, which is yet to be scheduled.
If I may, Chair, thank you, Sonia. And I was at that meeting and with the residents group, and I'm very pleased that happened, and very pleased to hear that we are having a coming report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. No other comments on that. Could I have Councillor Scott, seconder? Councillor Clearwater. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Good. Item 8.2, the Clean Air Work Programme update, including 2022 Winter Work Programme. The Winter Work Programme is an attachment 8.2.1, which was a paper deferred from our previous meeting. So that's what that's all about. There are 3 recommendations there. And I understand there's also a proposed amendment or an additional recommendation as well. Firstly, I'm wondering if a staff member could perhaps come to the table and talk to us about that.
Brian is online.
Brian? Brian's online. Brian, could you just talk to this paper, please?
Yes, good afternoon. Brian Reeves is my name. I'm the program lead for the air portfolio. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm here to present the Clean Air Work Programme update, including the Winter Work Programme 2022. I'll take the paper as read. I'd like to note the following key points. So this addendum provides an update to the previous paper, which was deferred from the 27 July meeting. The original paper is included as attachment 8.2.1. The winter pollution season has almost finished, with pollutant concentrations exceeding limits in several airsheds in recent months. Briefings on the Clean Air Work Programme were given to Waimakariri District Council and Timatanga District Council, with a further request from Waimakariri District Council for a briefing in September this year. Air quality A3 information posters were sent to each Canterbury Territorial Authority with polluted airsheds, that is Waimakariri District Council, Christchurch City Council, Ashburton District Council, Timatanga District Council and Waimakariri District Council. The Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand study was published on Wednesday, 6th of July. Further to that, the national standards only allow the daily PM10 concentrations to be above 50 micrograms per cubic metres of air 1 day per year. PM10 exceedances in Canterbury's polluted air sheds for this calendar year are shown in the updated high pollution event table at the bottom of page 22. So this shows a slight increase in exceedance levels in Kaiapoi, Timaru and Washtenae. Home heating is still by far the largest contributor to air quality issues in all areas, except Washtenae. Environment Canterbury's Clean Air Work Program aims to address emissions from home heating. Washtenae exceedances are related to industrial activity and caused by emissions discharged from various sources under different wind conditions over a 24-hour period. This includes sea salt during light nor'easterlies, soil particles during strong nor'west winds, road dust and dusty activities near the monitoring site during very light winds or calm periods, and dust sources south of the monitoring site during strong southerlies. However, the concentrations are most often high during work hours, and almost all exceedances occur on weekdays. The staff are ensuring alignment with the Waitaraka Washtenae Lagoon strategy development to ensure synergy of actions to improve air quality and well-being of the lagoon. Now coming back to the recommendations, you will find these on page 21, I believe, of your agenda pack. The recommendations are that the Air Quality, Transport and Urban Development Committee receives the Clean Air Work Program report and addendum, notes the exceedances of the National Environmental Standards for air quality, largely due to winter home heating in 5 of the 8 gazetted airsheds, notes the exceedances of the National Environmental Standards for air quality, largely due to industrial activity in Washtenae gazetted airshed. I'm happy to take any questions through you, Mr. Chair, and I note I also have Angie Scott, Paul Hopwood and Claire Patterson available to answer any questions specific to the report detail.
Thanks, Brian. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Mackenzie.
When will we start including PM 2.5 in these reports? Because that's the one which has the most risk to human health. When will that begin?
Can I defer that to you, Angie?
Sorry, yeah, do you want to address that one, Claire? Because I think that it's not really me to address that particular thing.
Yeah, so we're reporting on the National Environmental Standards, which is the statutory reporting. And at this point in time, we don't have a time frame for the NESAC review. They're still working on it at MFE. So they have recruited an analyst. And that person has come from within a regional council air quality science background, which is really, really useful. So they're definitely an air quality specialist, but we don't have a time frame yet for that review and that new standard. I mean, it is correlated because it's the fine particulates with PM10, so they do track down together.
It just seems sort of, I mean, I understand under our statutory obligations, we deal with PM10, but that's actually far less dangerous than PM 2.5. And yeah, it just sort of seems quite, I know we have to wait for MFE, but we could still probably include the data in these reports, even though we don't necessarily have a statutory obligation under it, simply because, yeah, I mean, it's people's lives that we're dealing with here.
Thank you. Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the matter that it's clear in the report that there's been a reduction of resources once it was considered that in fact we were doing well, I guess, with reducing emissions. And so it's particularly, my question's really, I understand that. My question is particularly related to the advertising, say, that we may, or advertising budget that we may have had around, or subsidy of this, especially for subsidies being available for people to purchase the clean air burners. How is that stacked up? And is that and I guess my follow-up question will be, is that something that needs to also be addressed in the next annual plan?
Yeah, and through the chair. In the past, we've had promotional campaigns where dates in our plan have required burners to be removed, and alongside that, we promoted our sort of financial assistance scheme. So we continue to promote our financial assistance through the Warmer Cheaper campaign, and we're increasing our resourcing, particularly in Christchurch, to deal with expiring burners over the coming years. So we'll certainly be looking to promote financial assistance where that's applicable, and we're also looking to review the subsidy scheme once we've got some decisions on the on Healthy Homes Canterbury. So that's scheduled to improve the reach and the accessibility of financial assistance.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Councillor Mackenzie. Yeah, I was just wondering, really, what if the national standards are exceeded, and they seem to be exceeded in a few places, what are the sanctions against this council for allowing that?
Previously, we've received letters from the Ministry for the Environment. Direct letters. But it's mainly about the consideration of what occurs within that polluted airshed. But there's not any particular strong impacts from central government. It's more about the health of the communities.
Okay, and in terms of exceedances across the country, do the ones here in Kapoi and Washlake start to stack up as if those towns are some of the worst in New Zealand, or how do we rank across other metropolitan centres?
We are definitely in the top. Otago also has issues with winter home heating in Arrowtown and Alexandra, which are comparable. But we have definitely turned the curve and on where we were at. I don't know whether Angie do you know more about that?
I would just say that yes, certainly Timaru is definitely up there, but I mean the numbers that you've seen in that report there, just bear in mind that that's for this winter, and as most of us know, it's been a pretty wet winter, and they make air quality actually look pretty good in terms of those numbers, whereas if we hadn't had quite such a wet year, then the numbers might be quite different. But we certainly, in areas like Timaru and Washtike, we're certainly up there, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Southworth.
Thank you. So I'm interested in where we have in the next 10 years we will, but under the long-term plan, delivering outcomes. And I'm just wondering, at the moment we have reduced emissions of greenhouse gases and other pollutants from our region's transport network and urban environments, and that's quite vague. It's not going to real specific percentage reductions and so on. Are we going to be in a position for our next long-term plan to actually put some specific percentage reductions in there? And then tying in with that as well, a note under 34 under climate change impacts that to date we haven't been able to include greenhouse gas emissions because they've been out of scope. But will that change, or is that changing?
It is changing. Do you want to?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So just in response to your Councillor Southworth's first question, so with respect to the transport emissions, particularly in Greater Christchurch, we're undertaking a Greater Christchurch transport plan and a spatial plan project at the moment, as you know. And part of the government's delivery against its emissions reduction targets is to develop targets around vehicle kilometres travelled for the light fleet. So VKT reduction targets are due to come out at the end of this year, and there'll be circulating some material to council on that shortly. First half of next year, my understanding is that Whakamutunga will be developing VKT reduction plans, and that'll be part of our mode shift planning that we do for transitioning from single occupant vehicles to better use of public and active modes of transport, so thus reducing our VKT. And that work is being enveloped into the transport plan and spatial plan work throughout the course of next year. So that ultimately reduces our emissions overall. Part of the Regional Transport Committee's work program as well, we do have specific emissions reduction targets as well already within the Regional Land Transport Plan. That's under review, and that's a paper that's later on in this agenda if we get to that. And that does outline that the government policy statement on land transport is to be reviewed as well, and that'll have a much greater climate change focus as well through that policy statement. So a number of different legislative changes that are occurring at the moment that will influence our overall emissions profile for transport. And your second question was around just the changes in terms of the RMA. So towards the end of this year, I believe there are changes to the RMA that will enable the consideration of greenhouse gas emissions under the RMA, whereas previously that was prohibited. And then that, I think, is towards the end of this year, early next year, that'll come into effect. So we'll provide further briefings to councillors to the changes to the RMA in that regard.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you. One of the things that council needs to be aware of, and probably in the next term, more than this term, because we're right at the end of this term, but the number of burners that's going to go over the expiry date is something like 24,000. That number might be right, but it's in the 20s, isn't it? Especially in Christchurch here. And we should note that unless the NESAC changes to 2.5 and it gives a really clear expectation on us, there's not much we can do. We've got no levers to actually pull other than to cooperate with the community and to offer incentives to change out. We've got no statutory levers that we can pull because we only look at what air quality is, and the smoke's got to come out of the chimney and then it's got to be non-compliant, and then we can do something about that. So that's why in places like Timatanga and Waimakariri and other places we've had smoke spotters and gone through our education process. So we've got a big issue in our future, and we really need to be looking at partnerships with Greater Christchurch Partnership and Christchurch City and others in order of how we're going to move forward. When the NESAC does change, and we're not too sure about that, Claire, we've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years about how it's going to change, then these airsheds are going to have a totally different graph associated with them because almost all of them don't meet the 2.5. And the airsheds have got those rules around them that you've got to be able to meet those targets 3 years in a row before you lose your airshed. So this thing's going to be with us for a while, determined by the next NESAC. So we just need to be aware of that. This is like it's going to be an emerging elephant in our room.
Thanks, Councillor Scott.
Just would burners that we put in currently that are currently permitted with the new PM 2.5 that wouldn't be legal or wouldn't meet the new PM 2.5 requirements. Is that what you're saying?
We don't know. So we are working to the current plan, which is based on PM 2.5 and achieving zero exceedances of the old World Health Organization PM 2.5 guideline. With what they consulted on initially with MFE was changing the NESAC to the old World Health Organization PM 2.5 guideline. If that had gone through, then the plan that we had would have achieved that. But we also, part of our submission was saying that there would be new guidelines coming out, and also the new happens report. So that's going to get folded in. And so we don't know what the PM 2.5 target will end up looking like. And there's also the now emerging NO2 issue from transport as well, and what's coming through from the World Health Organization and the happens report on that. So it's unclear. And then what we would need to do is a review and a planning process to understand what that looks like in Canterbury and what burners are suitable or not suitable, and the suitable rules in regards to that.
Thank you.
I would have said that actually. But the point that I want to make here about this piece of work that's happened and where we've got to with our graphs is that I think it started in 2012. The clean air, the current NESAC and Environment Canterbury picked that up. And at that point in time, we didn't have low emission burners. So the piece of work that's been done in Canterbury to develop low emission burners, which were about, I think, when I first started here, about $10,000 each, to get them into a market that brings them down into a competitive price with others, has been a substantial piece of work. That may be required to do something even more if that NESAC changes.
Great, thank you. Councillor Mackay, do you just final question of clarification, and then we can put the motions and then have a wee bit more discussion. Are you right, Tommy? Okay, well, look, I wonder if we could put the Councillor Clearwater.
Clarification to the staff, if I may. We were almost at a discussion. My question really is in relation to on page 24, paragraph 6. It's quite clear in there that as a council we're required to not only monitor but also improve air quality to meet the standards. So I guess my question is, could you perhaps just briefly cover how we do that, given that there are some limitations on what the tools ECan has available to it?
Yes, so in the addendum, you'll see the long-term trends that there are for PM 2.5, which is the standard, and the approach that is being taken to address that and improve it is the Clean Air Program and the implementation of the Canterbury Air Regional Plan. And I'm kind of looking at Paul here, where the focus is on the home heating, the Warmer Cheaper campaign, and all of those activities.
Yeah, so it's there are three branches to that really. It's the better burning, so compliant burners, better burning technique, and using good fuel. So it's largely educational, but also implementing the plan in the requirement to have plan compliant wood burners. So our regional plan allows wood burners, allows ultra low emission burners in our air sheds. So if we need to make a change from that would require a plan change in the future.
Thank you. What we might do now is put all the motions are up there. Item 4 there is a proposed amendment, and that was suggested as a way of bringing these issues we've just been talking about to the fore and included in our next resolutions register. If there are no objections to us moving 1, 2, 3 and 4 all together, is that acceptable to people? Okay, then we'll do that. I'll now put the motion that the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee 1 receives the Clean Air Work Programme report and addendum. 2 notes the exceedances of the national environmental standards for air quality, largely due to winter home heating in 5 of the 8 gazetted air sheds. 3 notes the exceedances of the national environmental standards of air quality, largely due to industrial activity in Washdyke gazetted airshed. And 4th, request staff to inform the incoming council of the recent international and local reports on the impact of air pollution on human health and develop a proposed work program for the annual plan, including sufficient staff resourcing in order to substantially improve air quality in Canterbury. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Mackenzie, seconder. Councillor Clearwater. Just open it up for some discussion. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, I would just like to say that the reason that we've got this fourth item in here is that the problem I see here is that for the last term of council, we've sort of had we're fine, we can handle it, picture painted for council, and not. I think this is the reason that we have not invested properly in this area, and I see this in our report here, even on page 23, under the key points, we say that the Health and Air Pollution New Zealand study was published on Wednesday, 6th of July, but you haven't mentioned that Canterbury is one of the worst in the country for deaths from air pollution in that report. You know, we need that transparency in order for council to see what is important to invest in. We need that transparency. We need that bad news so that we can actually fix these problems. Thank you.
So Clearwater.
I'll speak to 4 as well. Unfortunately, it does seem to me that just from the report, there's some acknowledgement really. There's a whole council who dropped the ball on this to a fair extent. And we've let it go, thinking, as Councillor Mackenzie has implied, in fact, all was okay. And clearly it hasn't been. And the number of exceedances, even over 1 month in August, being 5 in 1 month, I just think is unacceptable. And clearly, though, unfortunately, the resourcing of the program had been reduced. And it is of real concern that when we are we're starting to look at transport emissions, that it's clear in the report that in fact mortality from those emissions is likely to be worse than the mortality from road crashes. So I think it's pretty clear that as a council we are now taking this really seriously, and particularly that we look at this, that the next council look at this more carefully in its annual plan. So it's not like it's too late to pick it up, but I think it's time that as a council we certainly strongly suggest to the new council that we need to pick the ball up again.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
I'm pretty happy with 1, 2, and 3, but not 4. I think I'll be comfortable enough with 4 down to pollution on human health, but I'm not too sure that we have any levers that we can pull to substantially improve the air quality in Canterbury. I know in terms of what I just said about burners that we have got no levers to pull there. The burner levers sit with the TAs because they're about having a limb for a burner that's compliant. We've got no authority to go in and rip a burner out of someone's house or even point to them doing that. Again, with the transport emissions, what levers do we get to pull? We get to pull a public transport lever where we can replace diesel buses with electric buses. That's what this room can do. And that's why I'm not supporting it past the human health comma, because I don't think that we can ask another council to do something that we can't do. So I'm not too sure whether I can support 4 in its current form. And I think we need to think about that.
I'm slightly reluctant to move 4 because it is simply just asking that staff have a look at this. Given the given the findings of the Health and Pollution New Zealand report, it is alarming. 43,500 years of life has been lost in New Zealand due to anthropogenic air pollution in 2016 at a cost of 11.5 billion. So it's not, the number 4 is not really, in my mind, doing anything other than requesting that it's been looked at a little bit more. Anyway, look, I'll go to, I don't know who was next now.
Mine was
Right. Yeah, we're into discussion. So, yeah, I think.
Thank you. I support Councillor Scott, and having been part of that portfolio in the last iteration of council, I'm well aware of the work we did around the burners and bringing the low emission burners in. I'm well aware of our monitoring and the challenges across the city from emissions of vehicles, of transport, of industry. And we don't have levers to pull when it comes to improving air quality and a bunch of the things we want to do. I have no difficulty with us identifying and advocating, but I'm not sure what staffing and resourcing will achieve when we have no lever to pull. So happy that we are identify, talk, but we don't have a lever, we don't have a work stream other than to identify it.
Yeah, look, I'm in the same position as Councillor Scott and Councillor Sinkel. I think I will just jump to the defence of our staff and the work that they have done and the air portfolio in the last triennium and the ones before that. So any suggestion that's come to the floor that haven't done a good job, I think is a little bit underrated, really. And I just would like to draw to people's points at point 22, where we did reduce the resourcing in this program a couple of years ago because we hadn't met the major deadlines. But the current LTP, which this council has actually set, has got increases for resourcing to acknowledge the work that we're expected to do around the increase in burners that Councillor Scott's carefully outlined and meeting those timeframes. And as for the other stuff, as Claire said, it's still coming down the pipeline and we don't know exactly what it's looked like and what we're actually going to be dealing with. So my preference is to actually wait until we know what we're actually got to deal with before we go on and do the bottom part of 4.
Yeah, thanks. Peter stole the words from my mouth in terms of where things are at. So I'd like to put an amendment that we strike out anything beyond the word health. For the reasons that Peter has mentioned, but also I have some discomfort around us directing the next council in terms of what they should or shouldn't look at to put into the annual plan at such late time in the piece, given we're already in the election period, and given that they'll be rolling into that annual plan work. The new council will be substantially different. I just think it'd be more appropriate if we left it at request that a briefing comes to the new council and then any further steps can be taken by that council at that time. So propose an amendment to strike out from after health. Thanks.
Yeah, look, really just to question your interpretation of the this amendment for Mr. Chair, because you said it's not. You said it's just a request. But in fact, the second half, which various other councillors have already pointed out, is actually more than a request. It's more than a request. It's actually instructing the staff to develop a proposed work program, so I have the same reservations about that second half of that paragraph as the last few speakers. And your interpretation of the requirements of this is not the way you described it is not the way it reads.
Thanks, Councillor McKenzie. Yeah, I saw it as something for the annual plan, which always gets debated further anyway. But Councillor Clearwater.
Mr. Chairman, I have to check with Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie, but I to ensure that in fact this is on the record, I would reluctantly agree that we could put a full stop after the term health. But I do want to say a couple of things. I want to remind councillors what was written in the report about our responsibilities. So I did say it's in paragraph 6. What it says in relation to the national environmental standards for air quality in these areas, council is required to monitor and improve air quality to meet the standards. We do have some levers. They've been successfully used in the past. Simple things like promotion of burning dry wood, for example, promotion of having some subsidies available for people who can't afford them to purchase subsidy to purchase better burners, and that whole concept of better burners. There's plenty of leverage that if we have a mind to, that we can do it. And that's what we're here for, councillor. So it is. I'm happy just to give the new council a steer about, a record of the concerns that actually are raised in the report. And this was no criticism of me by staff per se. It's actually something that has happened for us as a council. We're the governance, we're responsible. And just wanting to flag something for the future.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Mackenzie, are you okay if we amend as Councillor Hands has suggested?
I'm not happy to, but I am pragmatic. And so what I would suggest is that you do keep the very last part, which is in order to substantially improve air quality, and just remove the annual plan and sufficient staff resourcing and proposed work program bit. Would that, because then that wouldn't, that's not quite so specific. However, I just want to rebut some of the comments that Councillor Scott has brought up. It's not for Councillor Scott to actually judge whether the new council can or cannot deal with a particular problem. That is up to them. And I would say that what people might see as limitations and impossibilities is merely that we are seeing our own limitations. While we've got brains in our heads, we will always have levers to pull. So, this is something the new council needs to know about, and we really do need staff resourcing in this area. But I am happy to strike out that part in order for this to pass. Thank you,
Councillor Farm, and then.
Thank you.
Can I do that point of order? Because I believe we should probably vote on Megan's amendment. It's not seconded yet. Can we do that before we have to strike stuff out?
I'm just getting a feel for what's going on in the room, and then we'll shape this up and go through the process.
I would be happy to second Megan's amendment as it sits on the table at the moment, if she's happy with that.
Well, yeah, we're just getting agreement from the two movers and the mover and the seconder as well. So we'll just, yeah. Councillor Farm first.
Look, I'm happy with whatever this says, and the reason I'm happy with it is because to me, I'm interpreting it as basically saying, staff, keep doing the job you're doing in informing council really well and ensuring that they can make good decisions about how they prioritise limited resources in this very important space. So good job, keep going. Thank you.
Okay, we'll remove the lines. We'll remove the lines, and then those four motions were put forward. We have to vote on those. Is that right? Yeah. So we're just going to take 1, 2, and 3, and we'll vote on those. All those in favour of 1, 2, and 3. Who's the move? You're moving it, Councillor Farm. Second it. Councillor Marshall. All those in favour? Okay, so putting those three together, all those in favour say aye. Against? Okay, those three have passed. We're now going to move to the number 4. And we have the yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was number 4 was moved by Councillor Mackenzie and seconded by Councillor Clearwater. We do have a proposed motion, but effectively what we're looking at.
Transport and Urban Development Committee.
We'll move that and then that last.
Yeah, so you're
Okay, so all those in favour of item 4, please say aye. This is the number 4 is an amendment proposed by Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Clearwater.
But point of, I don't know if it's a point of order, but I've understood that Councillor Clearwater as a seconder withdrew his support for this motion and supported the amended version.
Sorry, the other motion hasn't been. We've got to go through this one first, and
that doesn't all the fact that I understood he'd withdrawn his support for seconding the wording of this motion. Perhaps he could clarify it.
I could speak for myself. So you, Chief, I could speak for myself. I would.
Same, Councillor Clearwater. But anyway, we have to go through this motion here. So we're going to put this particular motion's been approved. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Do you want? If you're though, for those, could we just do a hands for that, please? Who's against? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against. And Apanui, 6 against. Councillor Marshall, are you against? 7 against. Okay, all those in favour. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour. The motion's lost. We'll now take an amendment. We'll move on then. Can we? We're going to bring this up again because Councillor Hands, we actually had to go through and lose that motion in order for you to put yours forward. We're now going to ask. We're going to ask you if you were prepared to put a revised motion.
No, it's lost. It's gone.
Councillor,
Can I kindly ask for an explanation as to, since it was moved as amendment and now you're saying no, as to the reason for saying no?
Because there's no motion to amend because the motion's lost. Moved from the paper.
Sorry.
Respect through you, Chair. Can I just request?
Just wait for a minute. Councillor Hands put forward an idea of an amendment to the previous motion. And we were voting on a loss of that particular motion, but your motion, a proposal to move an amendment is also on the table. It's foreshadowed. You foreshadowed that, and that was the reason that we went through this process. So
I'll withdraw it. Thanks.
Foreshadowed amendment.
You ruled it out when you put the unamended amendment. You should have accepted it as an amendment to the amendment.
Councillor Southworth.
If I'm able to move it, I will do. I was.
Move Councillor Southworth, seconded by Councillor Pauling. Any discussion on this?
No.
Any discussion on this?
Just a point of order. Understanding orders, we can't do materially similar repeated things. And so I just am concerned about this in regards to standing orders.
I have a point of order that my point of order was never dealt with. So how does that work? Honestly.
Sorry, I'm just getting some advice.
It seems to me that this is the proverbial bugger's muddle, but perhaps the staff could take the intent of the motion and we don't need to have a motion.
Just while they're talking, I am happy with the intent, but I think we've got ourselves into a total mess. And I, again, am more than happy for staff to take the intent.
I'm just referring to Standing Orders 23.7, and I'll read it to you. So this is an end of the matter and we can proceed with this. A meeting must dispose of an existing amendment before a new amendment can be foreshadowed. However, members may notify the chairperson that they intend to move further amendments as well as the nature of the content of those amendments. So that's where we are at the moment. And we have a new motion for item 4. And that has been moved by Councillor Southworth and Councillor Pauling. Any discussion on this? No discussion? Councillor McKenzie.
Just a question of your interpretation of standing orders. Are you sure the standing orders aren't referring to a separate amendment which doesn't relate to the previous amendment?
It was foreshadowed.
You're missing my point, Grant. You can't. I think you'll find if you read the whole of standing orders, you can't have an amendment that, as Nicole pointed out, that keeps reiterating the same point.
I'm sorry, I just read the standing. I'm going to interrupt you. Could you just hold fire? I've read what it says in the standing orders. That's what it says. That's what we're doing. So is there any discussion on this? If there's no discussion, I'm going to put the motion. The motion requests staff to inform the incoming council of the recent international and local reports on the impact of air pollution on human health in order to substantially improve air quality in Canterbury. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Peter Scott, do you wish to have your name included?
The standing orders, and I've asked for division.
Councillor Apanui, for or against?
Against.
Against. Thank you. Councillor McKenzie? Councillor McKenzie? Abstaining? Councillor Scott? Councillor Clearwater? Councillor McKenzie? Councillor Sunkel? I'm for. Councillor Hands? For. Councillor Pauling? For. Ten for, 1 against, 2 abstained. The motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to 8.3, Transforming Public Transport Work Programme Report. And this is a report, we're receiving this report on the work programme. If I could invite, who's talking to this? Sonia? Sonia, would you be able to speak to this report, please? Thank you.
Through the chair, tēnā koutou, ko Sonia Pollard tōku ingoa. I'm the Strategy and Planning Manager for Public Transport. I am going to offer an apology at first. I am recovering from flu, so I'm really hopeful that my throat and voice kind of hold out through this. I'm going to take the report as read, but provide you with a quick overview of some key areas of note. So despite the 50% fare initiative, patronage continues to be impacted by COVID-19. We're currently tracking around 71% of pre-COVID levels. This is against a budgeted, we expected to be around 75% at this stage. This could be due to several external factors. For example, more people working from home at the moment. There's a number of winter illnesses outside COVID-19, the flu, etc. The reliability of services and also the weather at the moment. We are looking to undertake some additional promotional activities working in with central government on really promoting the current fare offer. And this really leads us into our big campaign, which we're aiming for when our fare changes in February next year. Staff time has currently been reprioritised looking into reviewing the security and safety on the network. So this is something that we'll be getting back to shortly. You'll note from the paper that Timaru is not suffering from the same issues, but the two networks are very, very different essentially. A couple of highlights are the tertiary concession's been launched with some really great feedback from students and the universities. And the CAS-based service has been extended following community feedback, which is a great win for the community. Oh, sorry, 1 sec. Environment Canterbury, Christchurch City Council and operators are exploring opportunities to improve customer experience and safety of customers and drivers across the network and facilities. And at the moment, this is a key priority for staff, which we've stated has resulted in some reprioritisation of some of our other activities. The driver shortages remains an issue in Canterbury and in fact remains an issue nationally. We're currently experiencing around 3 to 5% of missed trips. Feedback from operators and unions suggests that the primary contributor to this situation is the base wage rate for drivers. And we've been working really closely with Whakamutunga on this critical industry issue, including a request for additional funding to support an increase in driver wages. The longer this issue goes unresolved, the greater the impact to our community and the harder it is for us to encourage mode shift to public transport. And the direct implications of this at the moment for Environment Canterbury are that delay in returning to the PT usage to pre-COVID levels, even with a 50% fare reduction. For many, a reduced price is not enough of an incentive to engage with an unreliable service. We're also unable to commit to the planned and approved service improvements for routes 17 and 28, which was scheduled for early 2023, meaning that these improvements will now be delayed. And if this issue remains an impact and causing issues going forward, it will potentially impact our fare trial, which is commencing in February 2023, as customers will continue to find the service unreliable in areas and thus we're less likely to attract more people and encourage it as a modal choice. From the attachment, one, you'll see the summary of the PT work programme, which shows that we're making really great progress on many of the agreed activities. But COVID-19 and the current driver shortage issue has resulted in some delays into a number of projects. This includes the zero emission fleet replacement strategy, the targeted express service delays and acceleration of PT Futures delivery. But now all of these are actually underway. National ticketing system and real-time information system has also suffered from delays due to COVID-19. And that's my quick whistle-stop update. I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thanks very much. Any questions of clarification? Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the tertiary concessionary delivery and the Casbay service extension, you say that hang on, just get your words, you're going to analyse the results. We'll receive reporting on initial insights and engagement in Q2. Presumably at in that reporting you will be telling us the substantial reporting on the substantial increase in patronage or otherwise, and reflecting on the investment, the return on investment in those cases.
Through you, Chair. Absolutely. With any change, large-scale initiative change, particularly around fares, we'll be doing extensive post-evaluation around the impact on patronage and any data actually we can get, customer insights, really looking at actually what's the impact of some of these initiatives that we have. and that will obviously help lead us into a work programme development as we go forward.
Given that patronage is still only at 71% of pre-COVID levels, it would seem to me that we would, rather than the feel-good factor, I'd like to see hardcore lifts in patronage to justify some of the investments we've made in these services.
Are there any other quick, Councillor Southworth?
Yeah, thanks for the report, Sonia. Under paragraph 6, it mentions the weather and patronage varying with weather patterns. Now, I know that the provision of covered bus stops varies around the city, and there are certain suburbs and areas where I hear people complaining more about the absence of covered stops. Are we able to look at the data, or have we looked at the data to see if there's any correlation between the scale of fluctuation and the weather patterns and the absence of covered stops? Is that something we've done or could do?
So through you, Chair, it's not actually something that we have done, but it's something that we could look at in the future. So at the moment, we're recruiting a network analyst. So this is a really exciting role for us to get into the team. And this is something that they can kind of get more involved in, really looking at those analytics and taking all the different kind of data that we have to really look at actually how can we improve our services.
And then another question in the table, there's mention about looking at on-demand options of additional trials in the Greater Christchurch area, and I just wondered whether Ashburton's on that list to be looked at as well, because we've heard, I think, from certainly one of the councillors down at Ashburton's interested in on-demand, and I believe that's come through some people in the community and possibly also through some of our annual plan submissions. I think we've heard that comment. So I'm just wondering, is that something, it just specifically identifies Greater Christchurch as the area they're being looked at for on-demand trials? I'm just wondering if is it being considered wider than that?
So through you, Chair, at the moment the scope is Greater Christchurch area, so it hasn't gone any wider than that, but that's something we could consider in the future.
You, Councillor Scott?
Oh, just a point around Ashburton. Ashburton would need a public transport rate before they considered what they were going to do. They've had an inquiry into us about my way type services, but that's just a generic inquiry, and I'm not too sure whether we've fulfilled that inquiry or not yet.
Councillor Mackay? Councillor Clearwater?
Into discussion, I just want to make some points. And if we're into discussion, I just want to make some points if we finish questions.
Right. So no more clarification? Thank you. Well, thanks, Sonia, for that. It looks like we've answered some questions. I'll put the motion and then there'll be some opportunity for discussion. So the motion that the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee receives the Transforming Public Transport Work Programme report. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Scott, seconder. Councillor Clearwater. And so we'll take some discussion. Councillor Clearwater.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is a really good report, and it's a great result, really, from all the work that's been done over the term. And I think when you look at the work programme and the number of big areas really have been achieved, I think is truly impressive. And I think too, combined with and aligned with the Public Transport Futures work, it is really excellent for Greater Christchurch. But in terms of the challenges, along with particularly with COVID, it's particularly gratifying that at times we've been up to 96% of the pre-COVID patronage, and for July pretty close to what the target was. So I think that's testimony to very hard work and very excellent planning in terms of the outcomes. But also I think it is also fair to say that alongside the government subsidies, that in fact they have been necessary. And while in fact there's some toing and froing in that area with Whakamutunga, clearly the subsidies have been a very important part of public transport's achievement in Christchurch.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
I just wanted to make a comment really in reply to Vicky's comments about the Ashburton request, supposed request for a My Way trial. As I understand it, that's been an informal discussion rather than a request from the District Council, and should be treated accordingly. My discussion with the District Council down there has been that they would, when they understand the potential cost of running a My Way trial, they would run a mile. And so I think, as I understand it, they're happier to see trials being run out in other parts where already there's rates raised, and to follow the opportunity for that in the future at some stage.
Councillor Marshall.
Kia ora, thanks Chair, and thanks staff for another excellent update on our work programme. And also thank you to Sonia for a pretty awesome introduction there, especially on the manager driving shortages part. And it's very, very consistent with what I want to say about the driver shortages. In the annual plan deliberations, myself and Councillor Apanui tried to increase budget to secure higher driver wages. We argued that as Environment Canterbury, we can't run a successful or even a functional network without securing our network foundations, which is routes, buses and drivers. We argued that you can't have more bums on seats if there aren't seats to sit on. Despite this, Council approved spending to put more bums on seats through endorsing a fair trial without ensuring there are enough seats to sit on by adequately raising driver wages. Council made this choice with full knowledge we were already operating the Orbiter on a reduced frequency because we don't have enough drivers, and with the knowledge that our communities have previously tolerated months of weekend timetables because we don't have enough drivers. Because this council did not support budget to pay our drivers what they're worth, we have now compromised the potentially and very likely compromising the effectiveness of cheaper fares, which is what this council sacrificed driver wages to deliver, which is very, very ironic. The inability of some councillors to understand the reasonable consequences of their choices is very concerning, especially when we said this is what would happen. We said if you didn't secure the network foundations, you wouldn't be able to do everything else to increase patronage, because we can't service increased demand if we have no one to drive the bus. We told you you couldn't rely on funding from Waka Kotahi if we wanted to retain and recruit drivers. We heard concerns from staff about how fast Waka Kotahi could act and how much funding they could provide to increase driver wages. And yet some councillors still chose to believe that Waka Kotahi would provide timely and adequate funding. And how bittersweet this moment is. Look where we are. This council chose not to pay drivers what they need to stay in the industry. You chose not to support budget, which would have paid drivers what they're worth. Your choice has compromised our bus network. It has compromised our capacity to realise the benefits of reduced fares. It has compromised the performance and perception of this organisation. And who will bear the repercussions of this choice? Not this council. It will be Stephanie and our staff and our organisational reputation that will suffer. And this should weigh heavily on the shoulders of those councils who did not support our amendments to budgets that would have secured high driver wages.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to call a halt to that. Thank you. But yes.
My point of order is that, in fact, this alludes very, very clearly to the integrity of councillors. And I'm asking that those last statements be withdrawn.
Yes, you're making some statements there which I don't believe to be true in terms of our decision-making process and in terms of the processes that were required in terms of looking at driver wages and other things as well. So are you going to withdraw some of those comments?
My last statement was something should weigh heavily on your shoulders. I was not making a direct statement in terms of councillor integrity.
Mr. Chairman, I'm referring to the context of over the previous minute or so, and it's absolutely clear that aspersions are being cast at individual members of this council, and I'm asking again that they be withdrawn.
Respect for that.
No, you made some dispersions against all of us, and I think that you need to apologise and withdraw those comments that you have made, and do so now, please.
I'm sorry, I just want to speak in defence of Councillor Marshall. She didn't specifically name particular councillors. She does raise some good points, and I think sometimes we don't make perfect decisions, and I think it's worth reflecting on that. I think it's, people need to be able to speak up around this table and speak freely. Thank you.
I think we are all aware of the process required in making decisions about a wage rise for bus drivers. If councillors aren't familiar with what that process is, then we can advise you. But I'm just putting a halt to this conversation, and we'll move forward. But it's disappointing to hear what's been said here. Councillor Clearwater, are you satisfied that we just
Satisfied if the conversation is drawn to a close?
Pardon? No, you may not. I'm going to put this.
Why may I not finish?
I'm calling you to order. Thank you very much. And we're going to finish the conversation now. And I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Well, I'm not going to follow the exact line that Councillor Marshall has extended. I couldn't help but note when I read this paper, and my thinking was much the same, that we did choose the fair price without service improvements. Now, I am on record in here for wanting service improvements, and there's several pieces in this paper that sort of support it. Around point 8, where the comment is in Timaru patronage is 11.8% above pre-COVID, noting that the 50% reduction initiative is actually not in place in Timaru. So, it's just showing you the importance of service. So, and I accept that if you don't have a good service and you don't have drivers to drive the buses, et cetera, you can't provide the service. So I just really want to put that on the record.
Councillor Zunkel, you had Councillor Hands.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave the meeting. I've got better things to do. Thanks.
Thanks very much. That's the end of the discussion. We'll just put the motion that the Equality Transport and Urban Development Committee receives the Transforming Public Transport Work Programme report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We're just going to move on to item 8.4, the Orbiter Review. And I'm wondering if, yes, Jess Stevens could introduce this report for us. Thank you, Jess. Hi, Jess, welcome to the table. This is the first time you've been to the table, so you just fire away when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll get started while it loads. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Through you, Mr. Chair, Environment Canterbury's public transport team would like to share our Orbiter service review with the committee. This is Ros Service, our community engagement advisor, and I am Jess Stevens, operations planner as well. I've got Catherine, the director, next to us. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to present today, as it is my first time. So here's the agenda for today. Due to timing, I'll take the paper as read and run through the key salient points and the recommendations with some time for questions at the end. From 1999 to 2019, the Orbiter connected the university main campus to Bush and Mall using Homestead Lane, as seen in the grey route on the PowerPoint. In 2019, the UC closed Homestead Lane for building works and safety, and so the Orbiter was temporarily rerouted to Waimakariri Road, as seen in the green route. Now that construction is complete, Environment Canterbury worked closely with the UC to see if there was an opportunity to use Homestead Lane again. However, as UC is the road controlling authority, they've decided buses cannot be put down there from a health and safety perspective, as they want it to be a pedestrian safe zone. As a result of this, Environment Canterbury has undertaken the service review to understand and consider how the orbiter can best service the island area. We analysed route options and chose these two that maximise accessibility to take up for community engagement through consultation. The first was option A, retain the current route with no change as seen in the purple route. The second was option B, the route would change to Island Road as seen in the blue route. Consultation was thorough over a 3-week period. We saw high participation with 801 submissions, including written submissions from Christchurch City Council, the UC, Parkstone Retirement Village residents, and Villa Maria and Riccarton High Schools. The results of the consultation showed that 61% of respondents preferred option A to retain the current route and 36% preferred option B, Island Road. Our recommended option is option A to retain the current Waimakariri Road route as well as work with Christchurch City Council to align infrastructure with Homestead Lane, which would provide more accessibility to passengers. This portion of Waimakariri Road is also not directly serviced by any other route, whereas the university main campus is serviced on Island Road with the high frequency Core 3 route as well as the 100. It's also serviced on Clyde Road by the 120 and on Craig Road by the 130. This option also supports the preferred consultation option and the data that we have. Our next steps following this meeting is to continue to work with Christchurch City Council to align infrastructure and continue to work with the UC to improve public transport options and encourage student and staff mode shift. Through the PT Futures program, the orbiter is set to be reviewed in 2025-2026. So the recommendations we have for the committee are: 1, notes that the current orbiter route via Waimakariri Road, option A, will become the permanent route. And 2, notes that the staff will work with Christchurch City Council on bus stop locations adjacent to the Homestead Lane pedestrian safe zone to improve access from the orbiter to the main university campus. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jess. Are there any questions of clarification for Jess? Councillor Southworth.
I had just one. With the university, we asked whether the orbiter bus could go down Homestead Lane, and am I right in thinking that they've said no to that, and that was in the context that it would be just the bus. It wasn't about opening it up to all traffic or none, but just literally just having the bus, and they still said no to that. Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. They want to keep it as a pedestrian safe zone, so no buses or no external cars.
To really clarify, so not even just one bus every 15 or 10 minutes?
Yes, no to any buses going through.
Thank you. Any other question? Councillor Paula.
Yeah, kia ora. Thanks for this work. I note that the University of Canterbury sort of favoured the Island Road route. We've been in contact with them since to tell them what we're thinking. And was the Student Association asked, and what did they think?
So through the chair, yes, we talked fairly regularly before we started the consultation with the university, so they were well aware of what we were proposing and a variety of alternate routes that we looked at and the pros and cons. And I have a meeting with them tomorrow to tell them as a result of today.
An association, were they engaged?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, the Student Association were part of all those meetings and will be tomorrow as well.
Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you, Ros and Jess. You've indicated that, in fact, on Waimakariri Road, the orbiter is really the only bus service being provided here. So on Clyde Road, which goes Island Road, sorry, which goes past the university, could you just give us an indication of the bus services that there are that actually go down Island Road?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we have our high frequency 3 that goes down every 10 minutes in peak hours. And we also have the 100, which is between 15, 20 and 30 minutes, but in peak time, 15 minutes.
Thanks, Jess. Any other questions or clarification? No, that's great. Thank you. You may leave the table. I'll put the motion now, and then there'll be an opportunity for discussion. So the motions are that the Air Quality, Transport and Urban Development Committee, one, notes that the current orbiter route via Waimakariri Road, option A, will become the permanent route. Notes that staff will work with Christchurch City Council on bus stop locations adjacent to the Homestead Lane pedestrian safe zone to improve access from the orbiter to the university main campus. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Mackenzie, seconder. Councillor Southworth. Any discussion? Councillor Marshall.
Kia ora, Chair. I just really want to thank and acknowledge staff for the communications campaign they did around this. They did a massive flyer drop. And when I was out in the community, heaps of people were like, yeah, I know what's going on, I know what's happening, and I know how to be involved. And so this was just a really, really fantastic example of our staff doing a really amazing job at engaging and building that awareness of what we're doing and how to be involved. So just, yeah, massive congratulations and thank you to everyone who was a part of this team to get this change. It's been really, really well managed. So congratulations.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to thank staff for the report, and it makes total sense, and especially the really good engagement which has been referred to, makes total sense to me that we include the high schools which are on or near Waimakariri Road, and by the time they get to university, they've understood the bus system clearly, I'm sure. So, and like that's there are clearly really good services close by or right on Island Road there for the university students. And so I think this is by far, given the circumstances around the lane that goes through the university, this is by far the best solution.
Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, and also I support, well, thanks staff, it's clearly a really thoroughly done piece of work. And I ultimately land with staff advice going with the Waimakariri Road option. I think that as Councillor Clearwater has mentioned, yeah, having those high schools, and it mentions primary schools as well, supporting that A route. And also I think it was an elderly residential area as well. So I think given the services already on the Island Road, that it stacks up and it's, you know, it's fair. So can't say fairer than that.
Anyone else? Councillor Pauling.
Yeah, kia ora, I'm supportive of this too. I just have a question. It's more maybe for Grant and Catherine. So we're just noting this. Is that because it's delegated to staff to do all this work, but I'm just confused why we're not like approving it? Or is that what we need to do? Or I don't know. I'm just interested. Just for the future, because do we, like with route reviews and stuff, do we approve them or do we just note them?
Thanks, Craig. It's worth asking the question though. I just want to offer my support as well, and realise that in the report, which was really good and very thorough, it did appear that Church Corner and the intersection Waimakariri Road, Rickenham Road, and the shopping centre there was well patronised and you know, a busy route. And as Councillor Clearwater is saying, there are other routes around the university as well, including Island Road, Maidstone and Crake Road and Clyde Road. So it's pretty well serviced all the way around the campus. And I think that the fact that there's some intensive urban development accommodation in Homestead Lane, that it sort of makes sense that it's a fairly short link between the two. And if that can facilitate a good pedestrian environment to the campus, that's obviously another way through. So look, if no further discussion, so all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to 8.5, the Waimakariri Express Review. And Len, if you could come to the table and run us through that, that'd be great.
Tēnā koutou katoa no make mongatiri au no rakahuri au
ko Linfleet aho. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa. I'm Linfleet representing the PT team on this option. It's the Waimakariri 91 and 92 service that we're looking at here. It's a review of the faster director services that we are putting on from Waimakariri district. I'm quite prepared to take the item as read, the report as read, noting, of course, that councillors will recall that the introduction of the direct services were part of the council's commitment to the Greater Christchurch Partnership, and that Whakamutunga was building the Northern Motorway, and on the Northern Motorway they put on the high occupancy vehicle lane. Waimakariri District Council invested quite heavily at the time in providing on some park and ride services. So park and ride facilities in Waimakariri District in Rangiora and in Kaiapoi. The 91 and 92 direct services effectively were ECan's commitment to trial faster, more direct services from both Rangiora and Kaiapoi. I'm quite prepared to, as I say, to take the report as read and answer any questions from councillors.
Thanks, Len. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. Thank you, Len. I know you don't come from Kaiapoi, but is there any thinking being done by staff how we can increase the patronage on the 92? Because it's a bit disappointing, really, that numbers are still relatively low.
Numbers are, we would obviously like more numbers on the 92, but if you note from some of the graphs that were in the report, the last few months it's actually increasing on the 92, so that is encouraging. Any bus service that we introduce, you introduce a bus service, it takes a bit of a while for it to burn, and this one seems to actually be taking off a wee bit in the last few months, which is encouraging. Perhaps a reflection of the post-COVID times as well, and the fears.
Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, you say that it was recognised that cost recovery would never be better than 20%. What is the cost recovery at this stage?
Cost recovery is around 9% on this currently.
9%?
Yes.
Is that disappointing?
The nature of the service to and from Waimakariri, you're basically picking up at 2 or 3 stops and travelling a very long distance into town to drop people off at 2 or 3 stops. It's not like an orbiter service where you sell the seats multiple times. It's one pickup, one delivery. So,
sorry, I've cut you off. But is there a threshold at which what would be the threshold at which you might reconsider providing the service?
We don't have a threshold. That's something for the council to consider. There's a whole lot of other outcomes that come from, obviously, from public transport, and including climate change benefits and things like that. So,
any other questions of clarification? Thanks, Len. I think you could leave the table. Great, thank you. I'll put the motions that the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee agrees to permanently operate the 91 and 92 direct bus services to and from Waimakariri District. Note that continued improvements to these services will be made through the existing service review program and policies set out in the Regional Public Transport Plan. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Mackay, seconder, Councillor Clearwater. Any discussion? I'd just like to say something. Yeah, look, it's really popular. I'm sure the people of Waimakariri and Rangiora and Kaiapoi will be extremely pleased that this will now become soon to become a permanent service. I know my daughter catches the 7 o'clock bus from time to time, and it's standing room only. And your figures are indicating that on several occasions recently, the numbers are exceeding 39 per bus. and so it's really popular. And I appreciate your comments that, you know, if it becomes too popular, we'll have to review that and decide how we're going to handle the extra patronage. But it's the park and ride scheme's been really successful, and I think more and more people are taking up that service, obviously, so that's great. So the motion's been put. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Now we'll just move on to item 8.6, the Central City Shuttle update. Lynn, I'm wondering if you could come to the table and come to the table and talk about that as well. I just want to remind, while you're coming to the table, that this item is also being put to the Christchurch City Council tomorrow, and the same recommendations are being put as well. So Lynn, please proceed. We have online Kirsty Mahoney from the Christchurch City Council. Welcome, Kirsty, and I'm not sure who's going to go first, either you or Lynn.
Lynn can lead today and I'll lead tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Again, this is an item that I'm quite prepared to take the report as read, reminding the council that when the Central City was redesigned post-quake, the Accessible City Transport Plan identified PT-friendly routes through the centre of town, and Manchester Street was chosen as the central bus boulevard. We have 1,800 bus services per day and a weekday that use the corridors that are available to them, and we've obviously got plans to increase frequencies along those corridors as we increase frequency on our routes. Currently, there's no provision in either the CCC or the ECan LTP for a shuttle. Any feasibility would need to be assessed on the role a shuttle may play within the central city, and it would need to cover the items that we've listed in paragraph 12 of the report. A shuttle assessment will be an additional item added to what is an extensive list in the PT work programme, and additional items obviously may compromise our ability to deliver the work programme as it stands. As I say, quite prepared to take any questions on the shuttle report.
Thanks, Lynn. Any questions of clarification, Lan?
Yeah, thanks so much for this report. I was just wanting a question of clarification about the difference between the 1 in that there'd be no further action being required, or the 2.2 where we're adding the investigation into informing our next long-term plan without disrupting the existing priorities, and that, you know, it'd be jointly funded with Christchurch City Council. Is because I sort of feel like is that essentially the same thing? Because of course we're going to be working with City Council and looking at how an inner city services, and especially our existing services, can be elevated in use and that kind of thing. So I guess I'm just trying to understand what the difference is between 1 and 2.2 and whether staff have a preferred option.
I think 1 is more a case of saying you wouldn't be considering the shuttle service. 2.2 is we'll look at it and add it into a long-term plan.
I think the difference is that 1 is saying part of a public transport system. So, because that's what the letter was asking us to think about it as part of a public transport system. So if you said 1, then we wouldn't consider it as part of that. We would potentially continue to investigate other central city options.
Cool. I guess I just wish it did say that, because there's some, you know, especially in terms of working with our partners, it's sort of like the agree no further action kind of feels like it's over, done, like we're killing it. Whereas it's, to me, it's more nuanced than that. But thank you for your response. I'll take that into account.
Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you for the report. Just to clarify again to the recommendations. So although the 2.2 says that we'd add it to investigation without, and quote, without disrupting existing priorities, it's very clear from the report that in fact priorities would have to be changed. That we've got. Thanks. And I just wondered too, perhaps if Kirsty might comment or somebody might too, in relation to any additional bus routes in this central city area. Because my understanding is that the bus routes down Manchester Street, in fact, they have been planned as a major bus route thoroughfare. And for example, if we take Colombo Street and its existing, how it is existing, it has a cycle lane and it's pedestrian. So is that sort of part of this equation that has led, that in fact, I guess, allows the existing bus route system to be as it is?
Through the chair, yes, when an accessible city, central city transport plan was agreed upon, that was basically the nature of Colombo Street. It was walking, cycling, with a bit of car transport allowed in there as well. Buses were moved on to Manchester Street as the key bus boulevard.
Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, I just sort of following on from that. We had a deputation a while ago because the intent of the shuttle, I think, is to provide easy movement around the central business district for shoppers, and particularly, I think that being talked about, particularly maybe the elderly or women with young children or whatever. And when we had our deputation, which I believe came to CCC as well, Axel Wilkie. And so one of the suggestions he had was to have a bus going up Colombo, and it need not be all the 1,800 that are currently going up Manchester Street, but if just one of those high frequency routes were shifted to that central core up Colombo around the cathedral, that may meet that need, go part way towards at least the shuttle, and particularly with elderly customers, they already have free access to the bus with the gold card. So I'm just waiting, but to look at that, which seems like a much simpler thing than creating a whole new shuttle system, would that require a whole investigation, or is that something that we can sort of wrap in somehow? And particularly with the new ticketing system that we're expecting a bit further down the line, I acknowledge there's mass rapid transit, which will look at this, but that's much further out. So I'm just wondering, is that possible somewhere within all of this without a full-blown shuttle investigation?
Just through the chair, we could get Kirsty to comment on that from a city council point of view, but I'm certainly aware that there'd be some requirement for facilities along Colombo Street. Putting a bus down there for an existing service, you're looking at a large bus, and getting a large bus down Colombo Street through the existing traffic and the cycling and the pedestrian things, and stops don't exist on Colombo Street as well between the bus exchange and north of the square. So, but
if I can just comment on that. So I'm familiar with Oxford in the UK, where we have precisely that. Many cyclists, lots of pedestrians, and double-decker buses moving slowly. It's about the drivers actually being so, but without the cars, I have to say. But it's not unfeasible.
Thank you. Sonia, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a couple of comments for clarification that may help. So this paper is specifically talking to the inner city shuttle service. So that doesn't work on accessibility, and our normal service review would look at accessibility of the central city and essentially the whole entire network. So this doesn't, any decision through this paper doesn't stop any of that work that will already happen through the accessibility essentially of the central city and the whole network. This report specifically talks to further work and scoping of the potential of an inner city shuttle service.
Councillor Scott.
I'm just, Grant, I just think that what we need to do is, before we get to the recommendations, try and figure out with a fit for purpose because in my mind, I don't see them being fit for purpose. So I wondered whether, before we get to that juncture, whether we can have a discussion about them, because I think in isolation, it seems to me we're trying to wedge something into a really difficult space at this point in time, and maybe that we won't pay enough attention to what's happening, given what we know about all the other issues around funding and public transport and the future and all those sorts of things.
We'll come back to that, Peter, in a wee minute. Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, I guess my question's a bit along the lines of Peter's, because it says here that staff will jointly develop a scoping paper for investigation. Is this the scoping paper here? And if it is, it doesn't appear to provide enough information. So if this isn't the scoping paper, why are we being asked to make a decision today on options when in fact we haven't had the information?
You're quite correct. This is not a scoping paper. This is a paper suggesting that we fund a scoping process or not.
If I may, just to get the process clarified, because it goes back to Lion's question, if the answer is or not, then the next council could easily well, and so 2.1 is saying it's not appropriate for this council to make that decision, let's leave it to the next council. Yeah, cool.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Yes, I agree with Peter and Ian, actually. I mean, we have got that option in there, 2.1, to defer the decision for consideration by the incoming council. But yeah, I would just say I can't believe this discussion is not covering the Christchurch tram, which actually already covers some of the route that's in the proposed shuttle area. You can get an annual pass for the tram and just, you know, it works out to something like $1 a day or something to use that. I would have thought there would have been more of a holistic approach taken to this idea. And also I note that Councillor Apanui wanted to say something about the idea of having like a zone of a free zone as well. So I sort of feel like there's more that needs to be teased out here. So to me, it seems more logical to defer this. But anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Clearwater.
Mr. Chairman, the staff advice is that this isn't a scoping report. So I guess other concepts, for example, including the much loved tram, could also be included if this council or a future council wants to ask for one. It just seems to me, in terms of the process that Councillor Scott has suggested, that in fact, that we start with 2.1 to defer it, and then if people don't want to do that, I guess it would go back to no further action. But it just seems to me that perhaps as a process, if we move or have put on the table one of those options, and I'd suggest 2.1 to begin with, rather than relitigate the whole lot, because they're all different. They're all different concepts.
Councillor Mackay, were you wanting to ask a question?
Yeah, we still on questions, or we're going to have an opportunity for discussion? Because I mean,
Kia ora, Len. Just because I live in Horsell and my residents asked me about this question a bit, but I just need to know a little bit more about if we did go with 2.3, for example, what exactly is the impact on the Route 7 service review, and what's the pros and cons of that, please?
We have a very extensive PT work program. Layering another item on it will potentially compromise some of the existing work program.
Also, the same resourcing that would be doing the Central City Shuttle would be the same resourcing who does a service review. So it's, yeah.
In like time, maybe, tell me what the impact on Route 7 service review would be. Like, when's it meant to be done, and when?
The Route 7 review is meant to be done later this year. So we are beginning that process very shortly.
And if we took on this, when might that be pushed out to?
Later.
In terms of, sorry, can I ask another question? In terms of sort of pros and cons of that, I do understand that there is lots of roadworks planned, etc., out to Horsell. So would that delay matter?
The reason that the 7 review is top of the pots, if you like, for later on this year is that we're conscious that it integrates with some of the plans from Whakamutunga in terms of NZ Up and City Council in terms of putting in bus lanes down Horsell Road, Lincoln Road corridor.
So pretty important that that remains in place?
We think so.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's all the questions of Sonia. Sorry, you have something to say?
Sorry, just through you, Chair. I thought it might be worth just really quickly covering, just clarifying what the resolutions or recommendations mean. So this is not work that we've got on our current work programme. So doing any kind of scoping or next level feasibility of an inner city shuttle service is not currently on our work programme. So the resolutions there are, one is that we decide that actually there's no further action needed and we don't need to look into this essentially any further. 2 is that we defer this decision for consideration by the incoming council. 2.2 is that actually you'll see there the timing is important for that because essentially it's moving this to the next long-term plan. So we'd be moving this work and considering it as part of the next 3-year LTP. If we need to want to do this work quicker and now, that's what 2.3 relates to. So if we were to do this work within this year, we would need to look at actually repurposing our work programme, and that's where the Route 7 service review would become delayed because we would need some of that funding and we would need the resourcing in order to repurpose and put our staff onto working on the inner city shuttle service scope. So I hope that helps.
Yep, thank you very much. Now, what we need to do is consider taking a 10-minute break. Will people be prepared to take a 10-minute break? And if so, need somebody to move that we do that. Councillor Sunkle, second. Councillor Clearwater. So we'll adjourn and come back about 15:15, and we can be thinking about which direction we might want to go in the meantime. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're now proceeding with looking at the recommendations for item 8.6. And during our recess, there appears to also be an amendment foreshadowed. Now, I'm just thinking the amendment, the foreshadowed amendment, where do we not put that up? Councillor Farm, could you just confirm that that's your proposal?
Yes, thank you. I will confirm that, but if you could just delete the words just so that it says work with Christchurch City Council and just delete the reference to the Greater Christchurch Partnership, again, of which this is not part of. It's just something that keeps coming up directly with Christchurch City Council. So I can confirm that that is my proposed amendment now. Oh, Chair, mine is an amendment to 1, and the reason being that otherwise, because if it flies, we can move on, but otherwise we need to go through all the rest to get to it. Yeah.
Okay, we have an amendment to number 1. Just bring that up. So number 1, agree that no further, I'll put the motion, agree that no further action is required or to work with Christchurch City Council. We have to vote on number 1 first, don't we?
No. We're just going to go.
So put number one.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to move the amendment. And the proposed, well, the initial motions, there's three of them. There's three of them there, isn't it? Or do you want to do number one? Yeah. Okay, let's just do one at a time. So Councillor Sunkle has agreed to move number one. The seconder for number one. Councillor Clearwater. So number one, and well, we have to sort of call for the amendment. Yeah. So we'll now move the amendment, which is to work with Christchurch City Council to incorporate our shared aims of improving patronage within the central city as part of our public transport work program in the period 22 to 24 to inform the next long-term plan without disrupting existing priorities, with the expectation that this is jointly funded with Christchurch City Council. Second that. You move. Well, I think we'll have to put that. Yeah, so we'll put that motion. Or some discussion on that. Sorry, Councillor Sunkle.
Thank you. As a mover of the first motion, which I probably support more than the second, I am happy with the amendment, or would be happy if we removed the last statement of with the expectation that this is jointly funded by Christchurch City. So I'm happy for us to have a conversation about the ongoing work, but I'm not happy in putting us into a place of funding. So if we could, with the discretion of the amendment mover and seconder, I would be happy with what we then have in place. Thank you.
Councillor Farm, are you happy with that amendment? Councillor Mackenzie, you're happy with that? Councillor Clearwater,
So a discussion on the amendment. I'm not happy with an amendment that really asks us to do something which staff are already doing and which is already taking part. I think improving patronage across Greater Christchurch is just all part of PT Futures. And I think that this amendment is unnecessary because it actually emanates from a specific concept of a central city shuttle. And so I just think it just, to me, is unnecessary.
Councillor Scott?
I would have supported one originally without the amendment because I think there's enough moving parts in our future for public transport, including National Land Transport Fund lack of funds, PD Futures, the GCP conversation that we need to have, and the changing PTOM model that we have. So these things will all play out. But I do, in saying that, I do support the amendment.
Pauline?
Kia ora. John, can you just explain a little bit more about that, removing that last bit, please?
I'm happy with the first part to incorporate our shared aims, improving patronage across the city, working together, a nice long-term plan without disrupting the priority. So that basically says we continue with the work jointly with Christchurch City. The last piece for me creates an expectation that we will jointly fund works with Christchurch City. And so we have a responsibility for the buses. Christchurch City has responsibility for the stuff that sits on the side of the road and a bunch of things. So I don't want any confusion in a motion that suggests we might pay or jointly fund things other than what we're responsible for until we have had a conversation, or unless we have a conversation. That's my reason. Thank you.
Just clarify, we have had the conversation, the letters, an exchange of letters between the Christchurch City Council and ourselves, with the suggestion that other parties would also come on board. And at the initial discussion, Christchurch NZ was okay. It's also a business community could be take place, but this is I think that this is an unnecessary amendment and that it is virtually the same as 2.2, which actually is a bit clearer in what it's meaning.
No,
Is it not?
it doesn't refer to the central city shuttle, just it's not making.
Yeah, could I please explain why it's different to 2.2?
Yeah, I see what you mean, but the central city, the whole point of this discussion is the central city shuttle, that the city council have asked if we could investigate this a little bit more. It's not necessarily other things.
Absolutely, it is about the central city shuttle. But do you understand and have you seen from the information that that is just it's based on a desire to have a central city shuttle rather than a desire to mobilise the central city within our existing network, which actually links with transport around the greater Christchurch partnership area and onward. Like, this is about an actual integrated system, which Christchurch City actually refer to themselves, the importance of that. Having a specific central city shuttle for the sake of having a central city shuttle does not make sense. I haven't seen anything which says it makes sense other than the idea of the Christchurch City's central city shuttle. And 2.2 or 2.3 buys into that idea and tells our staff to go make the central city shuttle work. It doesn't work. And that's why we need to make the decision now and get it over with and work together as we are as part of the greater Christchurch partnership to actually mobilise people and do what we're doing. That's what we need to do. So it's a nice way of saying thanks, but no thanks. That's what it is.
Yeah. Look, we'll put it in. We'll put this amendment. Councillor Mihi, you had something to say. Just
Thank you. Look, I agree totally with where Lan's coming from, because to me, this is about the city and a shuttle. They've obviously talked to business partners, tourist organisations and things like that. So it's not public transport for the greater Christchurch as I see it. So yeah, the beneficiaries are quite a small group of people, and I would have supported one completely, but I support the amendment as it is. That's passed.
so that's carried, and that means effectively that we don't need to go further in terms of discussing items 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.3.
Now
Yep. Okay. Okay, we'll do that as the substantive motion. And Councillor Farm, Councillor Mackenzie, all those in favour of this being the substantive motion, please confirm, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you. Can I make a suggestion that's being co-chair at this point in time? I suggest the RTC papers.
Yes, if you could go through the RTC papers, 8.7. Yes, I think that's a good idea, because they are basically have been reported on, and they're reporting back from the RTC committee and the RTC program. And 8.8 is basically the same. And 8.9, I understand that report was discussed at the RTC meeting. And again, it's a large report for information only. So we'll now go to 8.10. 8.10 is also reporting back. And so we're going to go to 9, a resolution to go into. But you need to put the.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to put those 3 papers as a recommendation that they be taken as read so that they are then completed.
Through Mr. Chair, I agree with Councillor Scott. All the next four papers are all really for information only, so I'm happy as staff to take any questions from councillors afterwards, but I was just going to suggest that each individual paper needs to have its recommendations taken and voted on, and that just gets us through. It'll take 5 minutes, and then you've got time for the PX item.
8.7. Reports, recommendation reports to be taken. Discussion, say aye. Against. Take it up. 8.8. 8.8 development report. Peter. Long. Peter. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. 2.9, understanding our future transport. Canterbury, taking the red. John, Peter. Easy understanding. Favour, please say aye. Now on item 9.
1-0.
10. Canterbury and transport plan. Taking the red. Question.
May I ask
Councillor Clearwater, question.
the different district councils work to be joined up together, and as you say in part 27, to ensure a consistent approach to speed management. So I just wonder perhaps if you just might comment on, I guess, the usefulness or potential usefulness of Environment Canterbury involved.
So the intention of the rule is to have a consistent approach to speeds, and when we're looking at the implementation of it, we're taking a strong focus on the intention of the rule, and we'll be looking at the operational, financial and reputational risks for the council, and also we're seeking a legal opinion on what can be delegated. So that work is underway. We don't want to duplicate any efforts. We don't want to need to recruit anybody with speed management expertise when that expertise sits within the road controlling authorities. So we are definitely taking that lens to whatever the approach might be.
Report to the Canterbury Transport Officers Group, they're already working together this way. Right.
Could I just suggest also that we'll bring further information back to council on both the RLTP review and the speed management planning work as we move through the next triennium of council as well.
Councillor Mackenzie, question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's really good to see under 9.c that there's going to be that consideration of the relationship between speed and emissions, and that's going to be examined at some point in future. Really good to see that in there. Thank you.
Take all those recommendations together. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now move on to resolution to go into public excluded. Councillor Sunkel second. Councillor Mackay. We'll just clear the room and take people offline. Okay, we're now have returned to the open meeting, and the recording's now started. There being no further business, the next meeting is this is the last meeting of the triennium for our committee. I just want to thank councillors for their deliberations over these last several months. The committee structure and the programs that the staff have given us have been fantastic, and there's a huge work program and effort by staff to deliver all of these things for us. And of course, along the way, we've had all sorts of things that have resulted in the programs being adjusted and amended. We have huge discussion. Well, we're having obviously discussions all the time with Whakamutunga and the government, and the funding issue is of paramount importance for us to get moving on this whole transportation process. But yeah, look, I'd just like to thank everybody. Thanks staff as well. Thank you very much. Councillor Scott, as co-chair, would you like to say something?
Just said it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'll now declare the meeting closed at 4 o'clock on the dot. And I invite Councillor Clearwater to close with a Karakia.
Unihia, ki te uru tapu nui o tāna. Kia waitea, kia mama, ki nākau, ki tinana. Te wairua, I te ara takata. Koia, ra e rongo. A kairo ake ki runga. Kia tina, tina. Homie, huie, tākuie.